Hello there, Inky Fingers here from Inky Fingers Architectural Art. Now today I'm going to be painting a simple ink and watercolour on another pad of mixed media paper. Previously I used a Winsor & Newton brand, but today I'm going to be using my favourite brand, Dale Arowney. And I'm going to be using a very limited palette, and the building of interest is going to be quite detailed, but everything else around it and behind it is going to be very indistinct. So the building that we're interested in painting is really going to pop. So enough of me blabbing on, let's get down to it, shall we? Now this is the picture we're going to paint today. It's the old bridge house in the Lake District. Quite a tourist type of area. Lots of people have painted this, lots of people have photographed this building, and this is the picture I've taken, the photograph I've taken the drawing from. Now you can see it's quite rough and ready in places, but that's what I want. I don't want an architectural type drawing because this is so old and it's old stonework. I want this to be quite loose and quite free. Now my last video I was using mixed media paper, and this is the paper I used, Winsor & Newton mixed media. Very good paper. It worked a treat, but this isn't my favourite. My favourite, which I have quite a few pads of A4 and A3, is Dale Arowney's mixed media multi-techniques paper. Now this paper, it's 250 GSMs, so it is again quite thick. It's white. Now if we compare the two from the paper I used previously, you can see it's a marked difference. This is more cream, this is more of a white paper, which is one thing I prefer. Secondly, I don't think you might not be able to see, but it does have a very slight grain, which seems to work well with watercolor, and of course using a pen on it, the pen just flows effortlessly over the surface. So this is the paper I'm going to be using today, and as we can see, it's acrylic, watercolor, pastels. It says you can do anything on this, pretty much anything on this, but I'll be using the pen, some ink, maybe some dilute washes of ink, and some watercolour here and there to give it a little bit of pizzazz. But now what I want to do is, this is the centre of interest of this building here. Stonework and maybe a little bit of this, but this is the interest. So the background buildings may only be pretty much like an outline. I may not colour them in at all. I may just leave them as an outline. This will be quite detailed and it'll be in colour, so it's really going to pop and it's going to make it a nice illustrative kind of picture. So all I need to do now really is to ink it all in, and I'm going to ink it in. I'm going to try again the Pilot parallel pen with 1.5 millimeter tip. And now the main outline of the building and the foreground stuff is drawn in. I'm going to draw in an outline of the background, but instead of using this pen, I'm going to use the Rotring 2000 with the 0.18 nib, because this is extraordinarily fine, and the fine lines will help, even though it's still black and it's ink, the fine lines will help just push this back because it's going to be less prominent than the ink in the foreground. and that's the picture all inked in. The only thing we have to do now is to ink in the actual detail in the little house itself. Now, as you can see, it's just basically stone blocks. So we don't want this to be too prominent, i.e. thick ink like this. So what I'll use is the rot ring again, and I should just do some blocks here and there, or whatever I fancy, because there's no right and no wrong. You can put as much detail as you like. You can put as few details as you like. You could just put a few little blocks here and there and let the brain fill it all in. Or you could, as I say, you could do the whole thing. So we'll see what happens. And that's the picture all inked in. So we can see in the foreground it's all more substantial, thicker ink, but in the background I've used the rotring pen with a very fine nib. So even if it still is ink, still black ink, but because it's very fine, it's pushed it into the background compared to this. And you can see all the stones that I've put in, all the details, again with the rotring. Now we don't want these details as thick as everything else because it's going to be too much. So that's all that done. All we need to do now is get the watercolor paints out and start slapping some washes over it. Now to start this off, I'm going to start off putting a wash on the building itself. Now this is a sort of a greeny grey colour. It's quite a nice for this kind of old stonework. Now remember, this is not watercolor paper, it is mixed media paper, so it's not going to go on the same, but this paper does handle watercolor washes surprisingly well. Now this building is pretty much all the same colour. A few little variations here and there, but I'm not really too bothered about putting the variations in. This is going to be more of a loose working sketchy type of thing. Now for the roof, it's the same colour, but I've just mixed in a little bit of green. If it runs into this a little bit, it doesn't matter. It just connects the two together. I will just put some of this colour here and there, just to give it a little bit of aged look. Now I am sort of following on the picture, as we can see here on the picture of where this sort of darker colour is. So I am sort of following, but at the same time I'm not really following much. That's much darker, so I'll just lob some there. Now it does dry quite quick because it's not watercolour paper, but it is quite warm in here. We've got a bit of a heat wave here in the United Kingdom at the moment. So in the studio it's 28 degrees Celsius. So yes, it does sort of dry quite quickly, but it doesn't matter. And that'll do for that. Now we have a nice blue door here, quite a vivid blue actually, which I suppose does give a nice bit of contrast to this dark stone wall. And we have a doorway here, but because the picture is so dark, I'm not really sure of what it is. So I'm going to put this in as a dark blue. It's just this colour here, the little bit of cobalt blue. Again, it gives a nice little bit of colour contrast. Now for the bush, I will put the bush in. It's quite a light colour, so I'm going to mix. It's not going to be a prominent colour, so I'll just do quite a light. Now this is just a bit of paint that's already in the palette, that's all dried up. I've just diluted it, wet it out again. So we'll put a little bit of that there, and then put a little bit of dark here and there. We can see it, it's starting to cockle now, if you can see that, because of course it's not watercolor paper, it's not as thick as watercolor paper. So we are putting a bit of paint onto this. Right, we'll just have that like that. So we don't want this to be too prominent, because this is the main study in our little picture. But what I will do now is, just with some of that paint, it needs a little bit more yellow in. I'm just going to put a little bit of the green, which you can see here, into this roof. Not everywhere, something like that. And we've got a little bit of, we actually have some green here. This is all greenery, far too bright, but I will put some darker in. I'll put a little bit of this green under there. Just to give it a little bit of connection to the roof. But I don't want to do too much at all, because I don't think there's any really green there. But I'm just playing around a little bit. Now we do have some water here. Now the water is very, very, very dark. So it's going to basically be the reflection of this, what's underneath it. So I think what I'll do, I'll just have, I'm just mixed up a little bit of this colour here, and just put some of the Payne's grey in, and I'll see what that's like. We can't have any colour in because it's not showing any colour. So I'll just paint that in there. We do have the underwash on the underneath of this bridge, little humpback bridge. So I'll just put that in there. I'll put another darker tone on later on. Now while this is drying, one thing we do have is the windows. Now because this has got tone on, the windows are still blank paper, and it's very, very distracting. So what do we do with the windows? They are quite dark, but they do have a little bit of light. But as I want this to be more of a sketchy, loose, sketchy type of picture, we could just do the windows dark. So we could paint them in, or we can use ink. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the this Pentel brush pen. I showed this pen in my video about explaining and demonstrating the brushes that I do use out of doors, and this is one of the brushes I use out of doors, which you can see it's got a nice fine brush, and it gives lovely fine lines to thick lines. It's very versatile, and so what I think I'll do here is just simply being careful, painting this very dark. Oop. The very fine tip, soft tip of this brush can catch you out sometimes. Now this isn't the original ink that came with this pen. The pen came with two little cartridges. I used the first cartridge up. I do have the second cartridge, but I haven't used that. That's kept safe. So the ink I've got in here is Liquitex Carbon Black acrylic ink. It's waterproof, it's very, very fluid, it's fantastic. So that's that now. And what I could do, it looks like I might have some little window panes in, so I could use some white ink, a fine brush, and then just do some little windows in. And because this is so black, it'll show up very, very nice. Next thing to do is we've got a nice little background wash on here, various tones. It does look quite nice, but of course some of these stones are darker, so we have to paint these a darker colour, and I think it'll be just sort of the greyish green colour we've used elsewhere, just in a stronger form. So we can see here, all around. So I have the wash here, which I've mixed in for the roof and such, and I'll just use that, and I'll see what it's going to be like. So this is just a very small, cheap brush, Art Studios, from the range here in the UK. Got a bag of them for nothing really. They're so cheap, but they're quite good. So let's just have a look at this. And I think that is going to be really nice. Especially as we know, this is going to dry a little bit lighter. It will soak in a little bit because, again, it's not watercolor paper. But I think that's why it looks so nice. It gives a certain matte look. So I'll just continue filling in these blocks, and then I'll come back. Now I've put some of the stonework in a darker tone. It's all dry, standing out quite nice against the background, because of course the background's got nothing in yet. I've just put the beginnings of this tree just with basically just blue, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of light red, just to make a grey colour. The next thing we'll do here is to mix the dark colour and just darken up underneath the bridge here, in the water, and we'll decide of where we want the sun. So I think in this case, if we have the sun from this direction, then all of this is going to be in shadow, which I don't want, and vice versa. If the sun's in this direction, then all this is going to be in shadow. So it's going to darken it up too much. I don't want that. And because, of course, as I say, this is not watercolor paper, you don't want to put too many washes on this paper. So I think we'll have the sun coming down this angle, hitting the corner of here. So both sides are going to be in sunlight, but we can have, where we've already got some darkness there, this can be dark. We can have some nice strong dark shadows under the eaves. This will obviously it'll be quite dark, and anything else where something's projecting away from the face of the building, we can get some nice dark. So I've mixed up quite a dark colour. This is just ultramarine blue and some carbon black, just to give a nice simple dark blue. So first off, we're going to put this nice dark shadow under here, and put a shadow or more of like a reflection of that under there. And then I'm just going to a little bit of clean water, just drag it out a bit. Again, that's going to darken this up nicely, and when that's dry we'll do a shadow on there on the bottom of this building. But what we need is a nice, you know, that could be a little bit darker I think, so mix a little bit more and just really blob that under there. We can, I think I will accentuate it a little bit just so it really looks like a shadow. Then we'll stick a little bit of shadow colour under there, and I'll just pull that down in there like so. I'll put a bit of shadow down here so it looks like the window frame is recessed into the building wall. We've got, this will be in shadow because it's got some sort of little balcony, or it looks like some sort of balcony. We'll do the same here. We'll do, actually I'll just do the whole of this doorway in a bit more, just so it's a bit darker. I'll do a little bit of dark around here. But I'll just go to now a small brush, and I'm just going to, even this small brush might be a little bit too big. I'm just going to put some tiny little strokes just so it looks like the tiles have a little bit of overhang. Doesn't need to look neat, or I don't think it needs to look neat. All it needs to look like is it's old, very old. Touch more just under there. Now I will work on this a little bit more, maybe put a touch more pen work just to jazz it up a little bit. But we need to sort the background out, so I'm not going to leave it like just an outline. I am going to put a wash on. We can see this colour is the same as this colour, but as this building is more in the background, I've changed the colour of this slightly, what I've mixed in, and I've put, and it's much more lighter. So it's a sort of, it's a funny stony green colour. And let's see, so this should be yes, you can see that it's very, very light, and this should lighten up more. I'm not going to put any detail whatsoever on this. We've got this pavement, which is, again, it's more of this greyish colour, so I've just put a little bit of water in. The colour I did for the shadows. I want to make it really, that's even, I would say it's too strong, so more water in. That looks nice, yeah, I'm happy with that. But we can see, even with, it's pretty much most of it's covered with colour now, it's still really in the distance compared to this, which is standing out like a sore thumb, which what we want. That roof has got a little bit of a dark, and I think this, ooh, that's a bit strong. I'm not sure what that colour is. don't know if it's white or, but in my little world it's just going to be a bit of a yellow ochre, very, very pale, just like so. And then we have our windows there, because we can't leave these light, they have to be dark or darker, as we can see. Now of course that's just the colour I've used elsewhere, so I've got this very pale darkish wash, and this will serve for the building, for the windows. And then we'll just let that dry. So now what I'm going to do is, as we've got lots of tones, lots of colours on, I'm just looking at this. I want a little bit more sunshine in this bush, as we've got in here. So I've got the original mix, the light mix. I'm just putting a touch more yellow in, Azo Yellow Light, and I'll just dab it in here and there. Just like so. Maybe it's a little bit, even though you can't see it, it will show up a little bit. Now what I do want is, we've got all the subdued tones around in the background. We have got two people and they are in the picture. Now I put these people in because I do like, so we put some bright colours in, and it will just put a nice splash of colour, a nice bit of bright red for his jumper. It's just going to give a really good splash of colour into the picture. So what red? Of course it'll have to be a bit of Daniel Smith Pyro Red. Knocks your socks off. So it's not a lot of red. He's got some blue jeans, so I'm just going to do that. Pretty much pure cobalt blue, but I am just going to let it run into the red, or the red run into the cobalt blue, so it goes a little bit purplish. So it's not going to be a boring colour, and then it's going to connect the jeans, his legs, to his body. Now this, I think, is a woman, but we'll have this woman again. We'll put this woman in this individual into a cobalt blue coat, and they can be wearing some black trousers. Now for the heads, or the skin, this is just a mucky mixture which I have in, which is, it'll probably be bits of light red, burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of yellow ochre, whatever, I'm not really sure. But it'll do. And we put some hair on afterwards, and his coat, he's wearing a green coat, which is quite nice because red and green complementary colours, even though you can't see much of the red now, but still be quite nice. And now while we've got the people there, they're basically just floating, so we need to put at least a little bit of shadow on them to connect them to the ground. So we've determined that the sunshine is coming down from this direction, so we're going to have some shadows. We'll just have some shadows there. That's a bag she's got in her hand, so we can't have anything over there. Just make that a little bit soft, and then what we'll do is, if we can, we're going to have the worst haircuts in Christendom. That could be a hat. So I think this guy is looking at this woman, who seems to be looking, maybe the head has just turned, so she's looking in this general direction. Now I think colour wise that's it. I didn't want much colour in. I wanted the background to be very subdued, which it is. I wanted the people in with a little bit of colour to give it a little bit of pop. I wanted a little bit of brighter colour into the head here, but I didn't want it to be so detailed that's going to detract from the house. So the only thing I need to do now, which I always do, is I go back over with a pen. Now it could be the old rotring with a very fine nib, or it could be something with a slightly thicker nib, and I will just go over parts of it and just maybe define some lines a little bit deeper, and even put texture into the picture with the rotring. So by putting some hatch lines in to just emphasize, as you can see, and just emphasize the shadows, make them a tad darker. And also what it does is that it gives it texture. Remember, we can't dry brush it, do anything like that on this paper. It won't allow us. So we can do a little bit of hatching this way. So now it's cross hatching. Same with the windows. And then we'll just add all of this extra detail. And what I can also do is just go over or under some of these bricks or these stones and just put a tiniest little bit of shadow, because remember the sun is coming down from this direction. So if I put a little line and this ultra fine rotring nib, it's not a nib, it's a tip really, is perfect for just making it look like that some of these stones are just recessed ever so slightly from the surface of the building. And again, it all gives us a little bit of dimensions, a little bit of 3D. And I may even just put a few little hatchings on some parts of some of these stones. So I'll do that all around the picture and then I'll be back. Now I've finished putting some details with the small rotring, very fine tipped nib, and if we look, that we can see is very fine scribblings just underneath the stonework, some hatch marks underneath where the shadows are, a little bit more details there in the stone there, and it's just little bits and bobs like that over just to give it a little bit more texture. So I think the only real thing you need to do now is to deal with these windows, as I think we need some white frames going across. So I'm just going to use a tiny little bottle of ink and a very fine brush. And then holding your breath, just put some little fine lines across. That's a little bit better. I don't really know if that's exactly how it is, but it's like that now. And then I think that is that. And that's it. Picture completed. It doesn't look too bad, considering it's on mixed media paper and not proper watercolor paper. The limited palette really works well, and it gives it a sort of grungy, dirty, gritty urban look, which is what I was after. And yes, the building does pop because we've hardly put any detail and the colours were so weak and muted in the background that the building of interest couldn't do anything but pop out. And I do like the two people. It gives a little bit of something. So if you would like to see more of this type of thing, then please subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you next week. So until then, goodbye.